Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is Stefan Richard. Stefan, who is from Sagkeeng First Nation in Manitoba, is a host of radio, television, and podcasts. He's also a former professional wrestler and a public speaker who lost everything and nearly his own life to drug addiction. Recently, Stefan signed on to star in and co-write a comedy series for APTN. Stefan, great to have you here with us this week.
What's up?
You're also the first guest, I believe, that we've had in studio for this show since about February 2019. So,
holy cow! I feel so important.
As you are.
2020.
2020, yeah. It feels much longer, actually.
Yeah.
But welcome to the studio. Welcome to the show.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you being here with us. You're involved in many, many things, as we just said there in the intro. Hard to know where to start, but I think we'll start with professional wrestling, because we've only ever had one other professional wrestler on the show, Wavell Star.
Wavell Star used to be my tag partner.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's start with wrestling and how you first became involved in wrestling.
Oh, man. I answered an internet ad on Slam Wrestling, which was a wrestling website. It still exists, but it was a really big news source in the early 2000s. I saw that there was a wrestling school in Winnipeg. They were having like an open tryout. I was 13 years old.
Wow.
I know. And got my mom to pay the $50. Went down there, got the crap kicked out of me for a few hours, and right up until 2015, it was pretty much like a full thing. Like I was doing it all the time.
Right.
So like 14 years.
Wow.
Yeah, getting thrown around.
Wrestling, Winnipeg's a big wrestling town.
Yeah.
Lots of big names have come from here. Jericho, Roddy Piper grew up here, just to name a few.
Yeah.
Still a tough business to crack, though. How did you manage?
I managed okay. I don't think I did too bad. Professional wrestling is very much like, it's performance art. It's not exactly sport. So if I'm a baseball player and I'm out there and I hit 70 home runs in one season, guaranteed I'm going to get a look from somewhere. Mm-hmm. But in professional wrestling, if you don't know the right people, if you don't, shake the right hand and do the right thing to the right people, then you're probably not going to get too far. I didn't really play that game. I wasn't really a political person, so I got by basically just on my talent. I ended up wrestling in the States and Japan, and doing pretty well for myself, but never got the big shot on like a worldwide stage or anything. But I feel like I did pretty good.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Who were some of the wrestlers that you idolized when you were growing up? I mean, with 13 years old, you're already wrestling, but who were some of the people that you looked up to?
As far as like Canadian wrestlers, we had like Bret Hart, we had Owen Hart, Roddy Piper. Those were some of my favorites as a kid. Ultimate Warrior is the first one I can really remember when I was like maybe like 3 or 4 years old when I really got into wrestling. My grandfather was into wrestling, and like Winnipeg was part of the AWA territory. So like Vern Gagne, Nick Bockwinkel, Jim Brunzell, old names that like maybe they
legends.
Maybe your parents might have watched, but those were some of the influences that I had. Like my grandfather was into the AWA, and that eventually passed it on to me. And WWF was a big thing in the 90s and early 2000s when I got involved with it. So those were just some of the names when I was a kid. And then when I got older, it became like, instead of the big huge stars that were doing WWF TV, I started finding like Japanese wrestling and Mexican wrestling and European wrestling, and finding the people who were just technically really good at it. So my taste changed as I got involved, but at the same time I was still a sucker for watching a Bret Hart match.
For sure.
Yeah.
Is it something you're still interested in? I mean, I loved the Warrior when I grew up too, and probably the end of what I would say was the NWO was the end of when I was like, I'm probably good with wrestling now. And kind of getting back into it again, but those were the heydays for me anyways.
Yeah.
Do you still watch?
Yeah, I still watch. I actually just had an offer to do a match later on this year, which I probably will do.
Nice.
Yeah, coming up in May. So, excuse me. Yeah, I'll probably take care of that and handle myself in May in the ring and hopefully not hurt myself too bad.
What was the toll on your body? 13 till 2015. That's a good run.
Yeah.
What was the toll physically for you?
Oh man, starting with just operations, a knee operation, an elbow operation, a nose operation from breaking my nose. Had a tooth kicked out, number of concussions. Some mornings, my back hurts so much that I have to get my partner to pull my legs to get me out of bed. So it was pretty immense. But, at the same time, do I regret it? No, I don't. I feel this way because I chose to live, the lifestyle of being a pro wrestler. But,
right.
It's pretty, the pain is pretty immense today, even a few years after.
You wrestled, like you said, all over the world, the United States, Canada, even Japan.
Mm.
Any highlights stick out for you?
Yeah, the Japan thing was a big deal. For me, that was always my goal, to wrestle in Japan, to wrestle overseas somewhere. I got to do it with a independent company called Big Japan Pro Wrestling, and they do that crazy stuff that maybe some people have seen on YouTube or whatever. It's like death match, and there's glass and barbed wire and everything all over the place. I got to wrestle for them. Another one, maybe even just the Winnipeg connection, being in the main event with Kenny Omega, who's, the former world champion. He's a Transcona guy. So doing those things, having wrestled world champions, Hall of Famers, those are things I look back fondly on. But then again, I look back fondly on wrestling my friends, because my friends were the ones that came up with, the ones that helped me learn, the ones that we travel the roads together. So to get in there with them is something I would still hold special. Even if I had a match, in a couple months' time and it was one of my friends, I would be more than happy.
I forgot to mention Omega, people like Cyrus. There's always like these independent matches that go on in Winnipeg too, not so much during the pandemic, obviously. But what do you think it is about Winnipeg that's such a big wrestling community?
So here's the thing. Winnipeg is so geographically cut off from everywhere as far as wrestling goes. Like if you live in New York, it's 2 hours to Boston, 2 hours to Philadelphia. It's 4 hours this way, 4 hours that way. You can get anywhere. Winnipeg, if you want to go somewhere, you got to drive 6 hours to Regina, which is smaller than here, or 7.5 south to Minneapolis, which is, it's got a good scene, but it's not on like an international stage. So if you get out of Winnipeg, you got to be really good. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned, Don Callis, Cyrus, Kenny Omega, Roddy Piper, Chris Jericho. There's a few others. Steve Corino was a guy who was born here, who is currently a producer in WWE NXT. He was born here, raised here for a bit, but ended up moving away with his family to the States. But he's a Winnipeg connection too. But to get out of Winnipeg, you got to be really good. You got to get noticed, because for somebody to fly you to New York or LA or Tokyo, it's a big plane ticket.
No kidding.
Yeah.
You mentioned you wrestled with Wavell, who is our only other wrestler on the show. Any Wavell stories for us?
Not really. Nothing that I can tell out of school. Wavell's a good guy. Very nice, very good wrestler. Does a lot for his community. So I got nothing good things to say about him.
Great guy. That was such a fun show. It's too bad it was in the pandemic, so we had hoped to go out there and have him throw me around in the ring a little. You mentioned that you had a meteoric rise as a professional wrestler, but an incredible fall.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the fall?
The fall just had to do with addiction. Addiction kind of took me out from, not only from wrestling, but from life for a long time. There was years where I was getting into some like hard and heavy stuff, and it really affected not only my personal life, professional life. By the end of it, I had very few friendships. I lost a marriage, lost my place to live. My child was taken out of my home with his mother, so I didn't have the homestead that I had during my wrestling days. It all fizzled away. Wrestling was gone too. I had left wrestling for probably about 3 years because of it. And, when I got sober, when I got clean, 2013, I made it kind of a goal of mine to not only try and help people, but also really try and help myself. Because, when I got clean, I was 25. And when you're 25 years old, you're still very young. you may not know what you want to do the rest of your life. And wrestling wasn't it. Wrestling wasn't going to pay the bills forever, because there's this thing in wrestling called a bump card. You have your bump card, which means you can only fall down so many times before your body says no more. And at 25, having it done, for 12 years at that point, I tried to come back and do some more up until 2015, and my body was just saying, you can't do this anymore. You can't push it any further, because guys in WWE are wrestling on the road with physical therapists and trainers, massage therapists, and I'm going in a broken ring in Regina or Okotoks, wherever I am, and got to get in a car 15 hours after that. It's not a beneficial business to the body.
You mentioned, you helped yourself and also help other people, and want to talk about that, but we do just have to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Stefan Richard. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is Stefan Richard, the multi-talented Stefan Richard. We've been discussing at first so far your professional wrestling career, and kind of left off on how you almost lost everything because of addiction.
Yeah.
How did you pull through? How did you find the strength to pull through that?
That's a really tough question to answer. I'd say the only thing that probably kept me going was my son at the time, because I really didn't have anything else. The friends, the jobs, the wrestling, everything was gone. So it was really my son. That's the only thing that kind of pulled me through.
You do a lot of public speaking about what you've gone through. What's your message to those that do struggle out there?
It depends on the person, really. It depends on where they're at and what their goals are, because there are people who struggle, and there are people who want the riches and want to leap out of addiction and to have the Lamborghinis and everything. But then there are people that just want to stop using, and I just tell them, just keep going day by day. Don't give up. Even if you slip and you fall, stay out of slippery places. That's one I used to hear all the time. If you don't want to slip, stay out of slippery places. But as far as the speaking itself, the general message is here's my story. Maybe you can learn from it, but maybe don't repeat the same things I did.
We're going to get into the radio stuff and all the other things you do. You're a personality out there, but talking, I guess, about your own experiences and stuff, was that a difficult decision to open up about your personal struggles?
Yeah, it really is, especially now that I'm a little bit further on in life, and it's 2022. I don't even remember the year because of the pandemic. Everybody's thrown off, but it's been a few years, and these things are. As the further it goes on, the harder it gets to talk about, honestly, because when you're freshly sober, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of, I should apologize to people. I need to fix things. And then when you're further on and you've taken that step back, it's like, man, I feel really bad about all that stuff. Yeah. And doing a lot of people wrong and doing things they shouldn't be doing. It's something that carries a lot of guilt, but I don't carry the guilt, if that makes sense.
Right. Moving to some of the things that you're more involved in now, and as a media personality, as I'll call you, how did you make that transition from professional wrestling to the media world?
So here's the thing, the one thing that I was good at in wrestling, obviously the wrestling part is important, but the interviews, getting in front of a microphone, in front of a camera like this, talking to the people, trying to sell them a ticket, that's the thing I was good at. And I figured, if I can't do this anymore, landing on my head and having my shoulder pop out and ripping my bicep, which was another one that happened, I should just use this part of it. And that's what I did. I chose to go the speaking route, the microphone route, and it eventually, the story goes, is that I was bouncing in a bar, because that's what I'd done while I was wrestling, for the most part. And when the live band would finish, usually the DJ would be like, thanks, they'll be back on stage later on tonight. Make sure you stick around or whatever. But they would also announce like drink specials and things like that. So when the band would come off, somebody just told me to go do it because I obviously had talent with a microphone. So I would go do that, and then it just kept going on every weekend. I would do the same thing. Like I would outro the band or intro the band, but I would make like a funny quirk, and then somebody's like, man, you should get into radio. Because at that time, you know, I didn't have any other prospects. So I said, yeah, why not? So I got into radio. I started doing like an afternoon show where I would just, you know, kind of get my feet wet a little bit. And then I got moved to morning radio, which is like an entirely different beast. Yeah, it's fast-paced. You got to be very interactive. Like afternoons, it's like people just have it on at work. You know what I mean? But in the morning time, people are getting to work, people are listening for news, people are listening for the sports. They missed the game last night. How do I keep them updated? It's a different animal, for sure.
Yeah, not a morning person myself.
Neither am I.
Funny you mentioned, you know, being that mic person in wrestling. I watched AEW last night for the first time. First time I watched wrestling in years was last night. And yeah, if you can't speak on the mic, that's a channel changer for me. You've been a host for NCI Radio for a number of years. That's Native Communications Inc. for people that don't know. An institution here in Manitoba, I would say, at least in my lifetime, offering radio programming throughout the province, designed for and by Indigenous people. Tell us about your roles there and how you got hooked up with NCI.
So I was actually doing a podcast here for APTN. I was doing the Digital Drum podcast, which was profiling Indigenous music. One of the members of the board of directors, I believe, was the CEO of NCI, still is, David McLeod. And, you know, we just happened to be at the same music conference one time because I was there for APTN and just talking to the artists. And we got to talking. There was a spot open. He said, you know, listen, if you ever want, you know, stop by, come by for the week. You can host for a few days, see if you like it. And that's what we did. And 1 week turned into 2, and 2 turned into 3, and 3 has turned into like 4 years now. So it was the right place, right time.
How important do you think the role is, like I say, NCI, kind of an institution here in the province, how important of a role do you think that is?
So NCI, the station I grew up on, you know, I love classic country. That's what my grandparents listen to. That's what my mom still listens to when she's in the car. It reaches from the Manitoba-U.S. border to like Churchill, to Dooley Lake, like end to end in Manitoba. And if you geographically look at that, like comparatively to the States, you could put the top of Manitoba at the U.S. border. That's like to Texas.
Right.
That's a big area to cover. And there's transmitters all over the province, so everybody gets the same station. Well, you know, 90% of the province gets the same station. And if you're putting Indigenous people with Indigenous perspectives on, you know, all day long to Indigenous people in those communities, it's a huge role. It's a huge impact that it has on the community, and I'm lucky enough to have a little bit of a sense of humor. So when I was doing afternoons on NCI, they have great news people, great morning radio hosts, but like I was a little bit different. I was a little looser, you know, I tried to make humor a big part of my show. To do that and to connect with the community, like there are certain words that I can use on the radio on NCI that currently in my current morning show, which is like a mainstream city station, I couldn't say, and nobody would understand it. But on NCI, there's this innate connection you can create if you are a member of the community. Because, you know, if I talk to somebody who uses the same slang terms that I do, we're going to connect, we're going to understand each other, and that's what happens. NCI has been obviously a huge part of Manitoba radio. They're on like 50 years, they're 51 years now. So I'm just very happy to be a tiny little part of that legacy.
Great work that NCI definitely does. You've also done some podcasts. Can you tell us a bit about those?
So, once I got out of wrestling and I was doing the bar thing and I was still, you know, hollering drink specials at drunk people, I would, like my friend Roger, who took this picture up here, by the way, of which I'm wearing the same shirt. I probably should have wore something different just to look a little bit, you know, fresh. But my friend Roger's a filmmaker, and he had a little Zoom recorder, and he said, man, you have all these stories. Just talk. And it was right around the same time that people were telling me to get into radio. So I called it the Ever Sick Podcast. I needed a name. He threw that out, and I said, sure, yeah. people will get it. Like, if you hear the name Ever Sick, you know what it's about. It's going to be loose, it's going to be fun, and it's probably going to be Indigenous. And that's what it was. So we tried to make it something like the Indigenous Tonight Show. That's what I wanted it to be. And then eventually I got to interview some like really cool people, like Reggie Leach. Reggie Leach came to Roger's house on like a whim. He messaged him on Facebook. He's like, hey, want to do a podcast? And he just drove over and did it. If somebody's asking me to show up to somebody's house randomly, I'm not going.
Right.
But Reggie Leach, the Conn Smythe winner, he's sitting at the table. He's got his Stanley Cup ring on his finger. And I'm like, dude, this is a tiny podcast. Like, what are you doing here? But at the same time, it's like people were taking a chance to come and talk to me and listen to me and, you know, share their experiences on this tiny little podcast. And that led to APTN asking me to do Digital Drum, which led to the radio, which led to more radio, which led to right here.
You're kind of ahead of the time on podcasts, really.
Maybe on time.
Or on time.
Yeah.
I mean, I only got into podcasts in the last couple of years, and because of 80s and 90s wrestling, that's basically like 90% of what I listen to is podcasts.
Okay, there you go.
But yeah, great stuff. More to talk about, including another connection here with APTN. We just have to step aside for one more break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Stefan Richard. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is the multi-talented Stefan Richard. And Stefan, we mentioned before the break that you've got another deal coming up with APTN.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Okay, so here's the cool thing. APTN Lumi, the streaming service, has, for some reason, I don't know why, given me a web series. The idea is there's a web series about reclaiming language. And it's supposed to be informational, inspirational, informative, all these things, but they wanted kind of like a humorous edge a little bit, which is why I guess they called me. I don't know if they're like laughing with me or at me, but They said, come on down, you know, help us, you know, put together a series in which we could talk to a group of elders, learn about the, you know, the culture of each elder and learn about their language. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to learn language and culture from all these incredible elders across the province.
Sounds amazing. What are you hoping to bring to the show and that people will get out of the show?
Again, like just the humor thing. There's a lot of things about our culture that are serious and need to be serious, but at the same time, we kind of got to break it up a little bit, you know, kind of just put our guards down and have some fun and be loose about it, because this generation, like my parents, both my parents, neither of them speak the language, but you know, now that there's grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are learning language now, that are learning it from, you know, whether going to school, taking a course, whatever it is. They didn't get it from their family. And it's a tragedy because that's what colonization has done. But there are more people proud to learn their language today. And that's what we're hoping to do, kind of engage the generation now and give people a chance to learn language. And not only learn language, learn the stories behind language, why things are the way they are, and why, you know, why certain communities talk with certain dialects, things like that. Just learning the nuances of language.
Sounds absolutely amazing. Looking forward to it. Stefan, we're all out of time. Thanks so much for being here in studio with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. These guys have been great. Camera people, Dennis, you're awesome.
Awesome stuff. That is all the time we have for this week. I'm Dennis Ward. We'll see you back here next week on Face to Face.